Hi there, welcome to the Quasi Show. This is Mary Ann. How are you, Mary?
I'm very well, thank you, Mary Ann, and we are on to a ripper of a subject today.
We are. Do you want to introduce it? I'm so excited.
We are talking about responsibility, and more importantly, we are talking, well, not more importantly, but drilling a little bit deeper into the area of being response-able. We had a little meeting the other day, didn't we?
Yes. So hashtag Responseable. We've now marketed that and copyrighted it as ours because it's not actually on Twitter, but it will be now. So what we're really saying here, Mary, is that to take away the heaviness of the idea of responsibility, whether that be taking responsibility for our emotions, our actions, our behaviours, whether it be in a leadership role, in an employment role, in our personal lives, in any
in our families, in our community.
Yeah. And so instead of looking at when we look at responsibility, it's like, oh my God, that's so heavy.
I tell you something just on that. That's something I can totally relate to, because some of the earlier work that I did, responsibility was such a big word for me, and it did feel very, very heavy. You sometimes feel that you are responsible for everything.
Yeah. Well, ultimately you are, but when we're looking at it from a negative aspect of heaviness and stress and it what does that mean? I've got to take responsibility, so there's no one to support me. It's all up to me. And what we're really offering here today, Mary, is to look at the word responsibility and take the last gift in it, which is ability, and offering people solutions how to actually have the ability to respond given any situation. And that's empowering. That's exciting.
Yes, it is. And we are offering people the space to get more of what they want in life and less of what they don't want.
Yeah. You just pinched my thing I talked to you about before.
Stole it
get more of what you do want and less of what you don't. Yeah, because when we're not recognizing or have any ability to respond, we go into reaction very, very quickly, right? And we get triggered and we want to push back, or we want to run away, or we end relationships, whether they be employment or personal relationships, friendships. We have arguments and discord and discomfort when we're not taking responsibility or having that ability to respond, to work through, to come to a better place, or be present enough with each other to actually look at it and go, wow, actually, I'm actually feeling really uncomfortable right now with you. So I need to actually have a look at this and take a walk and sort myself out, and not ever, ever cross that line of blame. As soon as you do that, you've actually just given your power away.
Wow, that's pretty deep, Mary Ann, and giving your power away and having the ability to respond. How do we do that in that moment when we? I know we've touched on this before in other podcasts about just holding that space or taking a breath, but often we're in such chaos that we think we're responding when we might end up in tears or lash out in anger.
Sure.
Are they responses? Are they adequate? I mean, that's certainly not adequate responses, but are they?
Well, as soon as we go into blame, this is what these podcasts are about, Mary. It's to help people unpack parts of their consciousness, their life, their belief system, their value system, who they're being at any given time, so they have a happier life, right? This is the whole, life matters. And so when we look at any reaction, as soon as I go into blame, I've just, what I'm actually trying to do is get power. So people put other people down to get power, right? But what they're actually doing is becoming powerless. And when they aren't owning their stuff or owning how they feel, they actually we go into victim. And, you know, when you go into victim, you've just lost all your power. And so you go into tantrums, and you go into the 2-year-old, and you go into the, it's your fault, or you made me feel. Instead of looking at it as this amazing opportunity to think, well, how often does this happen? Is my personality the sort of person that runs away when there's conflict? Do I hide? Do I retreat? Do I lash out? Do I fight back? How do I behave when I'm faced with having to take responsibility for what I'm actually creating?
Okay, so understanding that would be the first key to understanding what sort of person I am, how I instinctively respond, and how I'd like to be perhaps deliberately responding.
Or more emotionally mature in my response, you know, call upon higher wisdom, call upon that part of you that knows how to deal with this, but you've gone back into not staying present with the discomfort and thinking, look, as if we don't stay present with the discomfort for long enough, or even a minute, and we go straight back into an old pattern of blame and victimhood, we'll never grow, Mary.
No, we won't. We'll be stuck in the reactionary model that we've been stuck in.
And how many people do we know?
Work for us as toddlers.
Yeah, and how many people do we know like that in the workplace, in our personal lives, and the drama queens in our lives, you know, that it's always somebody else's problem, always somebody else's fault. And unfortunately, what happens is if we don't deal with it in that relationship, it will show up again. And so many people that we coach, we can clearly say they're still going through that pattern of saying, well, yeah. And I always say to people, how many times have you experienced this before? Oh, it's the same thing all the time. You know, nobody listens to me, or nobody does this, or it's everybody else's fault. And so there's no victims here.
No, so the pattern keeps re-emerging through one relationship into the next, or through one work environment into the next.
Until somebody actually wakes up and goes, have you ever noticed the only common thing in all this theme is you? Let's take a quick break, shall we, Mary?
Take a quick break. That's a good spot to finish on there.
Okay, we'll be back in one moment. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We finished on a really pertinent point. We finished on the thing in common with all these patterns is you,
me. You. We're the only one that's in the same situation. It's quite an eye
and time again.
Yeah, and it's quite daunting. It's like I remember, you know, being through my own stuff like that and thinking, well, why are you having this conflict? And who's
and I think that's also sorry, I'm speaking over top of you. I think that's also that sense that when people say being responsible, and that clear definition between being responsible or responsibility does seem to feel a little bit heavier. With responsible, it does shift you back to, or shift you into, a position of being able to do something, or be able to obviously respond in a way that might give you more of what you want in life, and give you a way to respond in a way that is a more enjoyable experience next time, or shifting the pattern, changing the pattern. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and I was coaching this amazing girl yesterday, 16 years of age, so bright, so aware. And she was in a situation that she was feeling really in conflict with two groups of friends. And when we talked about it, that she was getting really upset because she wasn't getting her point across. They weren't listening to her. She didn't feel respected. So she kept causing more conflict. And when we drilled down to it, and it's a really common thing for all of us, she recognized she wanted to be right. And so, and then we looked at the common thread in this being her. And I said, just imagine for a moment that it wasn't about being right. You actually decided that your opinion matters, but their opinion matters equally, and to respect their opinion.
Okay.
How can
That must have been quite a moment of revelation for that young person.
Yeah, but it was fantastic. So we did some EFT tapping around it, and she was just so happy to know that she didn't have to have this repetitive conflict, because she could actually have the ability to respond now. And we did some stuff about standing in her power and speaking her truth, and you know, and with these two groups of friends saying what she wanted to do instead of being a people pleaser. And when she did that, it was up to them whether they did what she wanted to do. There was no conflict anymore. And so I find often in employment situations, as well as personal relationships, we're in this tug of war about, well, I want this and you want that. And it's not we never stop to ask the question, well, how can we come to a resolution? How can we both get more of what we do want and less of what we don't? How can we both take, yes, I hear you, I see you, why do you, and understanding each other a little bit better by taking responsibility for what we're thinking and feeling, and offering a space to have that ability to respond, responsible.
Responseable, and indeed one of the key things you mentioned in there was respect, and which is a fundamental value for many of us, and that experience of wanting respect comes about when you're able to respect others and give them the space or hear their opinion, as that young girl was discovering. Listening to the opinion of others didn't make her wrong, didn't make them right, but taking the time to listen showed respect.
Yes.
And reciprocated. Perhaps it's not always reciprocated immediately. Have you noticed that sometimes we have to put these things out there for a while before they bounce back?
Well, sometimes when we stand in our power and speak our truth, it can upset the apple cart, right? So someone might have an agenda and not wanting to hear that, or they might have a pattern of domineering somebody to get their point across and just completely try and make you wrong. And so this is where conflict in the workplace is so powerful and overbearing, you know, and just breaks people's souls. You know, like people actually get so disturbed by it, they go into HR and they've got all sorts of drama happening, is because, you know, the ego comes in quite strongly. You know, in some leadership positions, it's all about the old 80s model of do as I say, not as I do. And not empowering from the ground up, instead of trying to take power over. And this is, I think, where even in our personal relationship or any relationship, if we're you know, both aware and we don't have any conflict really, because we're both able and willing to unpack a problem without running away and saying, I'm too uncomfortable, I don't want this anymore, or and it's just about saying, what are you feeling right now? How can we look at this from another viewpoint? And let's just make an agreement right now that we want to resolve this. Because anybody that doesn't want to resolve doesn't have the ability to respond and isn't response-able.
Indeed. And there's a lot of maturity in all those things that you've mentioned there, particularly how people can use a domineering approach or have an agenda in a workplace, which is often unseen until you're potentially put on the spot. There was an example that happened this week in our Australian Parliament, where someone's made an allegation or, you know, used a derogatory term to describe another person, And the fallout from that has been quite significant, and to the point that the Prime Minister has weighed in, and interestingly weighed in with the word respect, how respect needs to be re-established in workplace settings.
Yeah. Well, you need
And
something to resemble it, because like with neurosemantics, I always ask people the same question: what does respect mean to you? You know, because unless you're clear on how that shows up for you, it could mean just to be heard or listened to, or it could be something completely different, Mary, to somebody. It could mean like you know,
could mean opening a door for somebody else, which would be, in turn, could be construed as condescending to somebody else. So
yeah,
that's, I know, tricky. It's a tricky world these days, and understanding or defining what a value might mean and how it's expressed. And respect definitely can be different things to different people.
yeah. So if we go back to the ability to respond, or response able,
Yes.
then we could agree that it's why we have conflict in our lives, why we, especially in families, sibling rivalry and all of this sort of things, or in intimate relationships, or in work. It's just
not having the ability to respond is why we have conflict.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having the ability to respond would require other people. Does that require other people to give you that space to respond, or do you need to just stand up and take that space, hold that space?
I'm looking at this whole idea and this podcast to offer an invitation for people to start focusing their attention on a daily practice to increase their emotional intelligence, so they have the ability to respond to all situations in life. And it's not going to be a miracle overnight, and there'll always be challenged, every day in different situations. But the more aware I become of what's going on for me, then I have enough genuine ability to see what's going on for the other person. So that's where respect is just a soft cushioning to say, wow, I'm really triggered right now. My goodness, what's going on for this person as well. And to have the, hashtag response able, to give that gift to somebody else and say, look, how about we take a break? I need to go for a walk, or I can see that this is really starting to heat up right now. I'm actually feeling really vulnerable. Can we?
And I hear a lot of compassion coming through in how you're describing this, Marianne. So is that what goes hand in hand with being responsible, self-compassion and compassion for others?
Absolute key, Mary. You're a genius.
Thank you, darling.
You're responsible. And so compassion is empathy. Compassion is just...
Well, and compassion requires respect.
Yeah, compassion. Well, compassion is seeking to understand. So it's really seeking to understand, really genuinely seeking to understand. So how many people do you know that actually have the genuine enough interest in another to generally seek to understand? And it's a real downfall. It's our social demise, if we worked on ourselves enough to lift our frequency to a higher level of understanding, about our fellow man and what it is to be human and how we can respond to life, then we would, it would just be such a beautiful place to live in, yeah?
Well, it would be, we would ourselves, and it comes back again, we've gone full circle, Marianne, we've come back to ourselves and having self-compassion and actually being curious about others, or wanting to learn about others from our place of compassion.
Yeah, and that really leads me into speaking to the topic of self-compassion. And I think a reason that a lot of us can get stuck, and I've been stuck so many times in this, where we're so hard on ourselves, you know, and is that why we're so hard on others? Is that why we have so much judgment on others? Because we're so judgmental about ourselves, and we're so mean to ourselves. You know, we don't stop and consider, you know, it could be something like the office party, you know, and we got wasted, or we had conflict in a personal relationship, and we, you know, we might wake up the next day and feel so guilty, and then just beat the crap out of ourselves emotionally, instead of just taking the time to tune in and say, hey, and treat ourselves like our best friend. I mean, there's a reason why, and this is the responsible bit, there's a reason why we did what we did, and there's a reason why. There's always a cause, you know, just go back to cause and effect, the greatest Buddhist model ever, philosophy ever invented. There's the effect. So what's the cause? Why? What's going on for us to reach for relief, or go and do that repetitive behaviour?
So that might be a good place to take a little break and have a little contemplation about self-compassion and what it might mean to you, the listener.
Yeah. When was the last time you were actually really nice to yourself instead of beating yourself up? Yeah. Okay, back in one moment. Welcome back.
Hi, Marianne.
Yeah.
Well, we rounded off there. I hope everybody got a little moment to contemplate what self-compassion might mean for them as an individual, and perhaps, as you asked, when was the last time you practiced self-compassion?
Yeah, and it's a massive problem. It's the reason we get angry, frustrated, irritable, all of these resentment, jealousy,
Sadness.
Think there's something wrong with us, and
fear of missing out is an epidemic in our society at the moment.
Yeah,
and
I want more. I had that realization about something the other day. I want more. And, you know, we're all seeking freedom. We're all seeking this liberation in some way. And so when we want like more, and we get frustrated and angry, like the processes might look something like a lack of self-compassion is when we take our life so seriously because we want our careers to matter, mean something, our lives to mean something, and we're all seeking so much meaning. And so we have this fear and resistance going on at the same time, that we don't have the ability to respond because we're so caught up in the matrix and this net of confusion about what we're doing.
I can't help but point out, and the irony of us wanting our lives to matter and seeking meaning, and at the cost of being unkind to ourselves and unkind to others, and not showing compassion or practicing self-compassion. And if we were able to practice self-compassion and compassion to others and kindness to others, our lives would matter more and we would have more meaning.
Yes.
So
well done. That's beautiful, Mary.
Thank you. Been working on that one. No, I've just been listening to what you've been saying, Marianne, and keeping a curious mindset. And I think curiosity is a great attribute for anybody to practice, because the more curious you are, the more you are likely to learn. So
Correct.
Listening to you intently, and you've got some beautiful messages coming through today. So my question is now, how do we practice self-compassion? What can we give to our audience today about practicing self-compassion?
Great question. Self-compassion comes from self-inquiry. So meditation, hand on heart. Just imagine, would you speak to your best friend like that? Would you look in the mirror and go, oh my God? Or would you beat yourself up for being overweight? Would you get angry at yourself, at your best friend, if she went out and got trashed and did something crazy? Would you?
And what about the aspect of expectation? What we expect of ourselves? Would we expect those things of other people? Would we expect them to always be on their game and to always be there for you? Or
here's the interesting piece. I was doing a process the other day about more, and I was getting very frustrated with a certain situation, and I noticed straight away, a friend of mine and I were doing a timeline, which is an NLP process, going back, and I found myself back in a part of my life that was very addictive. And I met, in this process, that part of my life, and I was witnessing and noticing what I wanted at that time. And what I wanted at that time, which was about 20 years ago, was I wanted to be free. And so I really, really drilled into that. And free from what? I wanted to be free from fear, free from struggling, free from trying to make it. And what does that mean? Free from trying to make it. It's our biggest prison, our biggest prison in ourselves. Free from responsibility. I had a very big corporate company back then, and free from stress, free from all of these things. And so when I was in this process, to update that pattern, to say, well, actually, you are. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe after 20 years I was still operating in that old paradigm, because I hadn't popped into it yet, because the situation I was in today had triggered the more. And I hadn't been in that situation to date. And so I was still seeking an old identity that I thought I'd cleaned up, but clearly I hadn't. And wow, that was pure liberation. And then I got to the point within the conversation that it's enough. I've got it. It's enough. Enough. I don't need any more.
And did that mean that you are enough?
Yes. But more importantly, the process brought me to an updated feeling, because in our belief system, subconscious mind, and all of these things, we cause ourselves the most stress, not others. We cause ourselves the most stress. And it's because we're not available enough to ourselves to offer that compassion and to have a look inside, Mary, about why am I feeling this way? There's only me here. I'm the only common denominator in all my life story. So it's all me, and when we own it, only then can we then gather the tools to actually start practicing a new way of being, which is liberating.
Wow. Okay. I'm not quite sure what to add to that, Marianne, because that's a beautiful share that you've given everybody, and a beautiful movement into a new paradigm, a new way of operating for you. Yes, and something that's obviously achievable for everybody.
Yeah, so we might ask the question, so how do we look inside? What does that mean? How do we practice self-compassion? I was feeling very irritable today, and so even with all my practice, I'm human, and so I just got a pen and paper and wrote, I'm so frustrated because, and just wrote it out, and just within 2 minutes I was out of it. just by writing, journaling, automatic. And then,
well, I can tell you another way to do it is also to call somebody else up and ask them how they're doing, and actually being in service, as I know is important to you. It's a key theme of your life. How does being in service bring you back to a place of self-compassion very quickly?
Yeah. It's also being available enough by making sure you don't have that strong irritability. It's really, really good if you're sad, in your victim mode, go and help somebody else.
And one thing we've mentioned before, which is just like me, that phrase, that practice of looking at others and appreciating that just like me, they too are experiencing sadness or confusion or grief or
just
irritability at this moment.
Me, they want to be happy.
Just like me, they want to be happy.
Just like me, they want freedom. Just like me, they feel.
Just like me, they deserve kindness.
Yes.
Just like me, they are response-able.
Just like me, they're response-able. Well, it is about that projection, isn't it? So it all really comes down to this gift of emotional maturity, and it comes from that practice of emotional intelligence. And I can't stress it enough that we weren't response-able. Most of us haven't been. Most of our lives, we just get through it somehow. We create all these like coping mechanisms when life's not about coping mechanisms. It's about feeling freedom and liberation. It's about innovation. It's about empowerment. It's about this inspiration, that juice that flows through us creatively. It's about being happy, enjoy.
Joy and joy. Enjoy and joy.
Yes.
And peace of mind.
Yes.
Peace of mind.
Yes. And so the more we practice that stuff, opposed to how do I get out of this resistance by trying to protect myself and reacting or pushing that away, just be in it, be in the flow of it, is the golden nugget, really.
Be in the flow of it.
Yeah.
And yes, and that would certainly make one response-able. #response-able.
Yeah. So we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with some questions for our audience to wrap it up. How's that sound, Mary?
Sounds great, Marianne.
Okay, be back in 1 moment. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Okay, we've got some questions for people, haven't we, Marianne?
Well, my biggest thing is, of course, when we go into resistance, it's because we're afraid of something. So we're afraid to feel something. And if we don't, and we will never have the ability to respond or be response able when we're blocking ourselves from fear, that's where we throw things at other people and say, it's your fault, you made me feel, and all of these things. So the greatest question is, what am I afraid of that's blocking me to respond? And perhaps the question before around,
what are you afraid to feel?
What are you afraid to feel? Yeah. My biggest one for years was always being afraid to feel out of control, and what would that mean? And when you unpack it, you understand that, well, that's clearly why, and then you can reframe it. And so a great question for others is to also consider, where in your life are you repeating the same pattern? And have you noticed, or what is the repetitive conflict that you have in your life? And have you noticed that you're the only common denominator?
They're pretty groundbreaking questions, aren't they? You've got me thinking now, Marianne.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful.
One of the other things that's just popped up for me is, what are you afraid to be found out about?
Now that's a really big one. The secret chamber.
Yeah, the secret. What are you hiding?
That really brings us into another part where a lot of people are afraid people might find out something about them. That's a great question, and
perhaps we can dive into that on our next podcast.
Yeah, well, it's really about we think we've got to answer that question. That when people ask us something, we do actually have a private life, Mary. That we don't have to share all of ourselves with everybody all of the time, and that would be a great podcast to do.
Yeah, let's do that one. Because that feeds into a lot of things. It feeds into agendas. We've touched on agendas today and how they create conflict. We can't be all saintly. We must sometimes have agendas ourselves, and perhaps we can cover that in the next podcast. So, wrapping up for today, we're encouraging people to ask the questions like,
what is the greatest conflict in my life, and would I like to change it? Therefore, I need to take responsibility for perhaps that I'm the common denominator here. Like I will even go back to, here's a really great example, right? So I remember when after my divorce, and I would coach people on a few things, you start attracting what you need to learn. And I've noticed that the person I was coaching would be fully blaming their partner for the marriage breakup or whatever. And until I really took responsibility for my part and in my marriage breakup, and then I would easily be able to ask the question, what can you take responsibility for? And they'd be like, oh, having to have a look at that was a little bit, of a bee sting, really.
Yeah, nice. Yep. That's a wood sting.
Yeah, as soon as we can do that, oh my goodness, it's absolute liberation. It's like, yeah, well, goodness me.
Indeed.
Let me make a list.
Right. So shall we wrap this up for today? We're going to be we're working on an exciting leadership, team building, corporate cutting edge program, aren't we? All around Responseable.
Project #Responseable. Well, there's a lot of conflict in the workplace around that Me Too going beyond. So we're going to do a special event podcast with our other team member, Cheryl. So in today's podcast, it's really leaving people with the opportunity and the invitation to practice more self-compassion, to practice the ability to respond to situations. And by practicing self-inquiry and being really kind to ourselves for our shortcomings or our judgments on ourselves about we think we've got shortcomings, when really focusing on what's so great about us as well is also a really beautiful thing to consider. So it's been my pleasure connecting with you, Mary.
It's been a delight today. I've enjoyed it. You've given me a few things to think about and some questions to ask myself between now and the next podcast. Yes. It's always a delight, Marianne. You are a fountain of inspiration.
Well, I thought you were going to say a fountain of youth. I'll have that.
No, I'm not going to say that. You are. You might be. I don't.
Get journaling, Mary. Let's all get journaling. It's the best thing ever. All right. Lovely talking to you, and we'll be back next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Marianne. Bye.